So now, this is the Prophetic Activism focus group from Cross to the community. And we are this is October 21st. Ministry in Times of Crisis is the presentation. I'm the lecturer, Dr. Anthony Everett, and we're using the Cisco WebEx meeting for this. And so just wanted to share with you today our focus. Today, we have semester one as the main focus for this particular session. And so I wanted to give an overview, first of all, of the synergy and ministry focus. As stated before, the spiritual autobiography is the first step in all of this, and you all have already completed this. You've gone through your interests, you've gone through your skills, you've gone through your passions, and out of that spiritual autobiography, all of that information is there. Next is the ministry context, and in the ministry context, the focus there is to understand the context of where you are in ministry, or where you perceive yourself being in ministry. Out of that, a synergy paper is developed, and that synergy paper will take these learnings from your spiritual autobiography as well as from your ministry context, combine the two of them together. And with that combination, you'll come up with an hypothesis and a theme that'll help you go forward in developing your project and your candidacy review document, as well as your final document for this doctorate program. And so the hypothesis will be in the format of the if and then statement. If this particular thing happens, then that happens. And, it's a hypothesis from my earlier days in school. It was called an educated guess. So the educated guess will say that, okay, these are the skills and interests and passions I have. Here's the ministry context that I am a part of, that I fall under. There's a congruence or coming together of those things. And out of that, there's a problem somewhere. And so I give the example of the problem of education of African-American male middle school students and how the church can approach, helping those students. So the problem being is that African-American male middle school students in Cleveland are low-performing students academically, and so that's the overall problem. But the if-then statement, the hypothesis, the way to resolve that problem is one that says, if these students who are low-performing African-American males at this particular school in Cleveland, Ohio, are involved and engaged in a faith-based, culturally based after-school program that's put together by the church, then they will be successful in their academic performance. They will improve in their academic performance. And so then you're out to show why this happens. But the hypothesis is where you're able to say, okay, if this, then this. And so the means of doing that for me is prophetic activism. And we're going to go into what prophetic activism is in more detail. But the means of doing that, the prophetic activism now becomes the theme of what your work is going to be about. So you have a hypothesis, but you have this prophetic activism as the theme, because we could say that they're involved in the after-school program that is culturally based, is faith-based, and this is the outcome. But, what's the theme that brings all that together? And realizing that our discipline is that of coming from the church, And so that's how we go forward with that. From there, as we go into our foundations, our biblical foundations, our historical foundations, our theological foundations, and then also interdisciplinary foundations, where we're looking at other disciplines and how they approach the same problem that we were talking about. From there, we can develop all of that, because we got a hypothesis, and we got a theme, and now we got an understanding of what the project must be like, has to be like. And we've got the resources, because we know within ourselves, here are the interests, skills, and passions that we have. And then secondly, we know the context of which this must take place, where there are possibilities of engagement, not only with the church, but with other organizations and other people in that context. And so at any time, feel free to stop me. I'm going to go ahead and move forward, though. And going back to the theme of doing ministry in times of crisis for this particular semester, we have to define ministry and minister. And so Donald McKim defines ministry as the service to God in Jesus Christ rendered by the church and by individuals through the power of the Holy Spirit. So that service to God in Jesus Christ rendered by the church automatically says that it's all about service to God. It's not about service to organizations, institutions, specific people per se, but it's all about service to God in Jesus Christ. And that service is rendered by the church. When I see the church could be organization, but when I look at the church, I think of the church as the people who are actually the people of faith. And then also by individuals. Those individuals might not be people of faith, or they could be people of faith, but they are the ones who render the service to God, whatever that service might be, through the power of the Holy Spirit. That Holy Spirit being the spirit that transcends all of us, and that is able to empower us and inspire us to do the things that we need to do, that's going to be transformative in the lives of others. When we look at minister, McKim says that a minister is one who serves God, and it's inclusive of all who seek to carry out God's will. So going back to the first statement, the service to God in Jesus Christ rendered by the church, people, or by individuals, which are people as well. Those are the ministers in this case. Ministers, one who serves God. So individuals and people who serve God, inclusive of all who seek to carry out God's will. And so that all, to me, says that, and inclusive of all, says to me that doesn't mean that the person has to be exactly who I am, or that they look at things the way that I do, but that we can be open in terms of people who are serving and people who are receiving that service as well. There's no judgment in that when we talk about inclusive of all. So that means that inclusive of all means that not only is it African-American, cisgendered, straight males like myself, but it also means that we're talking about women, we're talking about people of varying sexual orientations, LGBTQIA+, however one identifies. We're talking about people who identify as Hispanic, Latino, Chicano, people who identify as indigenous, people who identify in any number of ways. It doesn't matter, all of those individuals, a minister who serves God. It could also mean that those individuals don't have to have the same faith belief that I have, and so I know that in United's program at one time, I've read some of the work of one of the former students who's now has a doctorate in ministry, who is actually a Muslim. And that Muslim was looking at how do you build a relationship between Christians and Muslims, and that was part of the doctoral thesis for that for that particular individual. But I'm not one to limit God to my own. This is my faith belief as a Christian, and I have a high Christology. I believe in Jesus Christ as dying on the cross for the salvation for all of humanity. But on the other hand, I have a respect and reverence for God that says that God not only works through me as a Christian, but God can work through a Muslim. God can work through a Jew, like Ruth Bader Ginsburg. God can work through a number of other people outside of my own belief and my own set system. And so, but Donald McKim provides that in his Westminster Dictionary of Theological Terms. Also, okay, did you all lose me for a second there? Okay, all right. We're back. But okay, also, we have to define prophecy and prophet in all of this. And so, because we're talking about prophetic activism, so, those words are important, prophecy and prophet. So prophecy, and this is all Donald McKim's definitions, which I think he has some great definitions here. Speaking on behalf of God to communicate God's will for a situation, and also used for the prediction or declaration of what will come to pass in the future. And so the first part of that, speaking on behalf of God to communicate God's will for a situation. Again, prophecy is one in which you have an understanding of what God's will is for a situation, and God is providing that to you through whatever means that God provides that. And then you're speaking on behalf, could be preaching, but it also could be your practice, how you actually are engaged and involved in communicating God's will for a situation. So preaching is one thing. We go to church on Sunday morning, in this pandemic, it's online right now, but you hear preachers that are saying a prophetic word, and they're saying what have you. This is a situation that's going on and communicating all of that. But then you have people showing communicating God's will through their actions. And so actions might be that you have ministers that are out on the streets with their hands up and say, don't shoot, Black Lives Matter. You have people protesting, you have other ways of response to what God's will is for whatever the situation is in times of crisis, for instance. Our communication to people might mean that when I go into an area, a store, for instance, a grocery store in a crowded area, in this time of crisis, in this COVID-19 crisis time, that I put on a mask, so not because it's protecting me, but because I'm protecting others, and I'm communicating my love for all of humanity, because now I've got this mask on, and I'm assuming that there's a possibility then that I might have this virus, and I don't want to spread that to anybody else. I'm showing love in that manner. It is also used for the prediction or declaration of what will come to pass in the future. So when I look at this definition is more in line with those who will do prophecy, in the sense of saying that God said this to me, and this is what who will prophesy. They will say, God has said this to me, and this is what's going to take place in the future. So because of this situation here, that we're going to see hurricanes and storms, and we're going to see this, that, and the other, and what have you, And a lot of time, you see some of this in scripture. And when you look at prophetic scripture more specifically, but you find that also in a lot of people attempting to put themselves in this prophetic office, and saying, well, this is what prophecy is, that I predict this and this is going to happen in the future. And a lot of times that type of prophecy or prophesying is one in which it really has not much to do with God in communicating God's will for a situation, but it has a lot to do with communicating somebody else's will, usually the person who's providing that proclamation, and what their will is for a situation or the time, the past, or what have you, And thus, you're going to find there are people that are. I would use the prosperity gospel, for instance, to say that if you sow $1,000 into my ministry, then at some time in the future, that is going to be a seed for $10,000 and more that's going to come back to you, And so I don't see God in that at all. I think that is something that one is trying to basically raise monies in a sense, and hoping that they'll get money, and then placing hope in others that they will get money, and that money, receiving that money, then becomes the will of God for these people. Am I making sense in terms of what I'm saying? So, that's what happens a lot of times in this prediction or declaration of what will come to pass in the future. We also have to identify prophet when we're talking about prophetic activism. So prophet is one who speaks on behalf of God to God's people, most prominently the Hebrew prophets whose writings are found in the Old Testament. And so now, going back to what I was talking about a moment ago, and we're talking about ministers not only being Christians, and not only being clergy, not only being lay people as well, but being others may have another faith. If we look at the Hebrew prophets, Muslims and Jews believe in the Hebrew prophets as well. So those individuals can be ministers. They don't believe the way that a Christian believes in God, because the Christianity, we have a Trinity that we believe in, a triune God of Heavenly Parent, Jesus Christ the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So that's not their belief, but they do have an understanding of these Hebrew prophets. To go on further, the Muslims in particular will look at Jesus Christ as a prophet, and rightfully so, because Jesus Christ was for us, although Jesus Christ for us as Christians is God. There's the prophetic office of Jesus Christ as well. And that's what we're really focusing on with prophetic activism is that prophetic piece. One who speaks on behalf of God to God's people, most prominently the Hebrew prophets whose writings are found in the Old Testament. Well, Luke 4:18-19, we'll touch back on that a little later in this presentation. But in that particular scripture, Jesus is given this sermon. And in that sermon, Jesus is referring back to Isaiah 61, and who is a prophet, and expressing the will of God, from that particular scripture. That's Jesus's biblical foundation in that particular moment, and so he's going back because Jesus didn't have the New Testament to use. Jesus was creating the New Testament, so he had the prophets of old, the Hebrew prophets, to be able to go to. Muslims use those prophets as well. Jews use those prophets as well, and so in that respect, this is what the prophet does. It speaks on behalf of God to God's people using the prophets of old. And in our case, and in the case of Islam, a lot of times using Christ as prophet, which brings me to this next slide. In John 15:15, it says, I do not call you servants any longer, because the servant does not know what the master is doing. But I have called you friends, because I have made known to you everything that I have heard from my Father. And so here you have Jesus in a very human Jesus, a very a Jesus that is placing oneself not above those who are around them, but on the same ground level with everyone else. But also saying that I've shared with you everything that I've heard from God, my heavenly parent. And so Christ as prophet, the description here is of the role of Jesus Christ as declarer of God's word and will during Jesus's earthly existence. And so this is before Jesus' ascension to heaven, but this is during this earthly existence of Jesus, that Jesus is declaring God's word and will. And prophet is also one of the classic offices of Christ, along with priest and king. So those are the offices that are established with Jesus Christ, that are also offices that are human offices. Prophet is a human office, priest is a human office, king is a human office as well. We also see Jesus Christ, as I said again, though, as a triune God. So that's another area. But here with this prophetic activism, again, Christ is we're focused on Christ as prophet. And go see if I can go forward on this. Let's see. Get that. Jump forward. Okay. So we're talking about times of crisis. Let's define time. Time is the period between the creation of the universe and its ultimate consummation. And this is all coming from Donald Kim. Time contrasts with eternity. Biblically and theologically, God transcends time, but humans are time-bound creatures until they enter into life after death and exist eternally. Now, this is Donald McKim's definition of what time is. So it's this period between the creation of the universe and its ultimate consummation. And that consummation could be seen in different ways. Some see that the beginning of creation was with the Garden of Eden story. And I say stories, actually, because there are two stories there. There are two creation stories there. But the end of it being revelation, that the end times come. And so that's one way of looking at it. There are other ways of looking at that ultimate consummation that is a continuation that just continues on of time from the creation of universe, and ultimate consummation could be eternity itself, or the beginning of eternity. So time contrasts with eternity, according to Kim. That time and eternity are different, according to McKim. And biblically and theologically, God goes beyond time, but humans and our lifespans we're creatures that are set in this particular time until life after death. And then we exist eternally. So then there's time and there's eternity, according to McKim. The word time itself, there are 25 definitions at least. And in Greek, when we look at the New Testament, and we look through that, and looked at the analytical concordance of that word, and 25 different definitions of it throughout the New Testament. So there's no one set way of identifying what time is in the New Testament. And we focus on two Greek definitions and two Swahili definitions that I want to share with you now. Two Greek definitions are chronos, which is linear time, Greek term for time that is quantitative and measurable. And so it's saying basically that the chronos is that time that says, okay, it is now 1:26 p.m. And, this is this particular time on this particular day. And it's linear, so it just keeps on going. So there'll never be another 1:26 on October 21st at this particular time and place. Just time just keeps on going, quantitative, and it's measurable. You can say that there's 1:26, and then 2 minutes from now will be 1:28, or now it's 1:27, and 2 minutes from now will be 1:29. And that time concept, just keeps on going. It's linear. This is Whitaker, coming from Whitaker, actually, the analytical accordance. And then kairos, the Greek term for time, denotes a special, significantly critical point in human history when God's will and purposes are carried out, particularly in the coming of Jesus Christ. And so here you have time being denoted as a special, significant, critical point in human history. That point can be an era. It can be an actual, at this particular point in time, this happened, or it could be that from this time to that time, these things happen, and God's will and purposes are carried out during that particular time. And they're talking about here, Kim is saying, particularly in the coming of Jesus Christ, as Jesus Christ is coming. A season, opportunity, age, or period of time concerned with spiritual quality. And so there's a spiritual sense that's involved with this Kairos time, which is not necessarily involved with the Chronos. Chronos, in a sense, is one that could identify what that Kairos time is in terms of this is the beginning point and this is the end point. But there's more to that Kairos time, in terms of, the actual quality of that time being spiritual with God's will and purposes being carried out. So then from John Samuel Mbiti, an African theologian, the late John Samuel Mbiti, he wrote that there are two different types of time. There's Sasa or Sasha, and there's Zamani. And the Sasa or Sasha is history from recent events, the now and the near future. And a lot of times I put down in parentheses, you've heard of colored people's time or CP time. And Caribbean people say the same thing, CP time, but they say Caribbean people's time. There's African time, Asian time, Asian people's time, Mexican people's time. All of these are times that people kind of identify culturally or ethnically. But it's exemplary. I think of Sasha and Sasha. This is the best example I can use, an illustration. One of the illustrations I can use of that. So when I think of Sasha and Zumani, I think of the two films that I think of. One is, I can't think of it. Coco. It is this film that deals with Mexican culture. I've forgotten the exact name of this film, but basically, they focus on the Day of the Dead. That's celebrated in Mexican culture, and it's a day when you remember those who have gone before you. So they have shrines, and they have. It's a festival, and they have food that they put out and what have you, and they have pictures of those who have gone on before. And it's in the sense to always remember those who have gone on, And the same thing comes to mind when I think of the Black Panther, the movie The Black Panther, in which T'Challa, who is the Black Panther, it takes this root that is given to him, and then he's covered up, and I'm not sure what he's covered up with, but then he goes into this state where he actually goes to be with the ancestors, and the one he identifies with most recently is his father, who had just died. And so he goes and he's there with his father, and he has conversation with his father. And his father, like the other ancestors in his realm, have taken the form of the panther. If you look at indigenous African religion, the people in the certain traditional societies, they take on different animals, and so those animals are the ones that they, the form of what they take on, and they will go ahead and as in that animal form, that's what they would identify with, and so I thought that both of those movies showed, had a great depiction of the beyond this particular living and existence, and that beyond that, so Sasha is focused on recent events, the now and the near future. So recent events are things that have taken place in the past, and that might be a death that has taken place. Someone who's gone on to be with, as we say in the Christian scriptures, the great cloud of witnesses in the sky. That have gone to be with those particular persons. That is Sasha. It also is the now. It's that now that you and I are communicating at this particular point. The recent events could be that we're recording this right now, and then this is shared with someone else beyond this particular session, and those persons might see it on online somewhere at our website, and might visit a website and say, "Oh, this is what they're talking about in this." And they talked about it at this particular time. So that's the events, the recent events, and it's also the now is taking place, but it's also the near future. It's where we're headed to. It's where we're going in terms of the future. That future that you can actually see. That I put it like this. That for a lot of folk, the eagle flies on Friday. Meaning they get paid on Friday. So I'm looking forward to when Friday comes, that future, that's part of my Sasha, that Friday is coming and I'm going to get paid. And I already got in mind, this is going to happen. That's going to happen because I've got money in my pocket and I'm going to do something with that, so that's part of the Sasha, that we talk about. Zamani, on the other hand, it goes back. It talks about the history from events of the past as remembered with the great cloud of witnesses, And so when we talk about the great cloud of witnesses, we're talking about Zamani. We also talk about Sasha if it's more recent, if it's like someone that we remembered who was passed on. I still remember my father. I've got a photo of my father up above my bookshelf. And that still reminds me of him. I still can remember my father and the things that he did and what have you. But my granddaughter has never met my father. And so she would never remember him. She will only remember him from the things that I've shared about him and talked about him. The history from events of the past is remembered with a great cloud of witnesses. Sasa feeds Zamani. So, the recent events that go behind us, feeds into the overall Zamani. Sasa and Zamani are both concerned with spiritual quality. this all conflicts with what McKim was talking about, because McKim was saying that, there's time, and that time ends when we die, and then there's eternity. From an African cultural or Caribbean cultural or Asian cultural or Mexican people's cultural or different other cultural or ethnic focuses, that time continues on. The eternity is part of Zamani, from an African cultural standpoint. And I'm sure that other ethnicities have other ways of identifying what that Zamani is as well. I'm categorizing when it has here Caribbean, African, Asian, Mexican people's time. I'm categorizing it in Sasha and Zamani, but this is definitely an African concept. This is a Swahili concept, in terms of that. So I'm gonna stop. Any questions or anything at this particular point, or any comments? Okay, let me go ahead and move on. So, and talking about ministry in times of crisis, we've already discussed ministry. We've talked about time, and we need to define crisis. So McKim says a crisis is a point of significance that anticipates future actions. A decision in relation to Jesus Christ and the Christian gospel is seen to be a point of crisis that provides a direction for one's future life and thus is of utmost importance. So in this sense, we're talking about future actions. We're talking about Kairos and Sasa, those concepts and connection in times of crisis. A decision in relation to Jesus Christ. What decision is that? What action is taking place with a particular situation or crisis, and that transforms that so that now it's moving in a direction that we know is the will of God, that's in relationship to Jesus Christ. And the Christian gospel then is seen to be a point of crisis that provides a direction for one's future life and thus of utmost importance. So this gospel, this good news that Christians are sharing, the good news of Jesus Christ, is that point of crisis that provides direction for one's future life, for transformation in one's life. So it's seen at a point of crisis. I wouldn't say it's crisis itself, but it's seen at a point of crisis. It's impacting whatever that crisis is. Essentially, what we're saying is that, and going back to that scripture, Luke 4:8-19, where Jesus is calling upon Isaiah, the prophet, and his words, and then saying that, I've been sent to set captives free and provide liberation to the oppressed, to give sight to the blind, and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor, and to provide good news for the poor. All of that is in that scripture. And all of that is the answer to the crisis that people are dealing with at this particular time, and it's the Kairos and the Sasa that connects in times of crisis as well. Let's see. Let me jump back. Okay, there we go. Crisis. Okay, so the different crises that we are experiencing. We've talked about these, and I've kind of cleaned up some of this from the last time. Right, it's out of the book of Isaiah. Thank you. But there are a number of different crises that we're dealing with. We're dealing with COVID-19 right now. We're in the midst of a pandemic. That's a health crisis that is global. It's touching everyone around the world. And there's the Ebola crisis. That is prevalent in a number of places in Africa. And it's been contained to Africa. There was one point where it did reach here in the United States, but it was very limited. It was under control. But COVID-19 is unlike Ebola. It hasn't been contained, and we're dealing with that as a crisis right now. Crisis that we're dealing with also is a lack of healthcare access. And when we're talking about crisis, we're talking about the crisis and how it impacts those who are oppressed and marginalized. There's environmental racism. You can take Flint, Michigan's water, for instance. There's the lead levels that are taking place there because of environmental racism that is not addressing, hasn't addressed the problem of lead in the water from the Flint River. That is based on the fact that at one point officials decided that it'd be cheaper to get water from Flint's River as opposed to the Detroit River where they had been getting the water before. And when they made the switch, the water, they found the pipes and the water and all was just very, the pipes are corroded, and the chemicals and all that were there were toxic, and but nothing was done about that, and even to this day, there's still people are providing water from outside of Flint to Flint, Michigan. I've lived in Flint, Michigan before. I know that General Motors was very big. It was called Buick City at one point, where Buick was the major place. It was a carriage town as well, where carriages prior to the automobile was the major place. And the automobile became big and was really considered Flint as a place where the automobile was developed. But having lived there and worked there, and I worked for General Motors at one time, and realized that the plants were polluting the environment. And so thus the water that they were using was coming from Detroit as opposed to the as opposed to the Flint River, because the Flint River was intoxicated, as well as, it has toxins all in it. And so the water from the Detroit River was coming from the Great Lakes, and Great Lakes, or one way or the other. I'm not sure exactly how that works. If the water from the Detroit River was going into the Great Lakes, or Great Lakes water was going into Detroit River, but you have fresh water there, from the Great Lakes, and so it was safer. They made the switch, and now you have the level, you have all of these toxins that are impacting people in Flint, Michigan. We look at Cleveland, Ohio, and lead, and their lead comes from lead-based paint in homes, and predominantly in a lot of older homes, because Cleveland has a lot of older homes, and they have what they call lead dust that gets in the air in those areas as well. And so you have children that are exposed to that at very early ages. You have infant mortality rates that are the highest in the nation in Cleveland, Ohio. And so those examples of environmental racism. These are all crises of health. We also have crises of humanity. Otis Moss III, the pastor of Trinity United Church of Christ in Chicago, talks about COVID-19, 1619 being the year in which this country was established, not necessarily from the standpoint of what we talk about 1776 and the Constitution and all these other things, but from an economic base. Capitalism became a stronghold here in the United States based on the transatlantic slave trade. And 1619 is when the first enslaved Africans were brought to the shores of the Americas, not the United States, but the Americas, in Virginia, and the transatlantic slave trade became huge from that. And so this is when systemic racism permeated or was established this country. So there's personal racism as well that is a part of that, because personal racism is a result of that systemic racism. You have the systemic racism that says we've got to keep certain people marginalized and oppressed based on their ethnicity, or based on the false construct of race. Then we have to do that in a personal manner as well, and indoctrinate people into believing that race is real, and that as they do that, because in the minds of people in the society, this false construct of race being real means that now it's okay. Racism is a part of the society, and racism is a valid part of our daily living. So this is a crisis of humanity for those who are marginalized and oppressed. There's a crisis of genocide that is taking place. At the same time, when you have 1619 taking place, you have those who are indigenous people in these lands, in the Americas, who were being wiped out because the settlers who came in and who were enslaving those who are African and through the transatlantic slave trade, saw no need for the people who were here originally and wanted to take over their lands. And so now you have this whole focus on genocide. But you could still say that genocide even exists today when you have communities of color, communities of people of African descent, as well as brown people in these communities that are or Hispanic people, Latino people in these communities, who are in communities that are incarcerated. This genocide is taking place in these places because now you have communities that are being marginalized in every way possible. They're being gentrified, and it's a newer form of genocide that's moving people out without concern for the needs of those individuals, but it's just focused on the needs of others who want to capitalize on the land and capitalize on whatever ventures they can do within that in that realm, in those regions. Crisis of enslavement. Modern day enslavement is in the form of human trafficking. That's real. It's taking place. I've had experience as a human rights commissioner here in Lexington, Kentucky. As well, I was human rights commissioner for Lexington, but I was also a human rights commissioner at large for the state of Kentucky. And I would hear cases. And one of the cases I heard was of someone who had come from India and who owned a and thank you for reminding me of that. I'll talk about that in a minute too, Amendment 13. But this whole focus on enslavement was one in which this human trafficking took place, in which someone owned a Subway store. Subway, we make Subway sandwiches. And they brought in people to work for them that were from India, but these people didn't have visas at all. So these people were working for them, and they didn't have much money that they were receiving. So they depended on the owners to provide them with food, to provide them with money, to provide them with a place to stay. And they pretty much were enslaved there, And so that's a modern day form of enslavement. Enslavement is still legal in our system today, as was just mentioned a moment ago. We have the 13th Amendment, and there's a documentary by Ava DuVernay that I suggest that you take a look at, called the 13th Amendment, or the 13th. And that amendment in the Constitution was one in which anybody who was enslaved was to become free, and have their freedom, with the exception of if they are in prison for any nature and what have you. If they're in prison, then they can become a slave again. And this still stands today. So when we look at mass incarceration in our society, that's enslavement. When we look at people that are being that for whatever reason it might be, that receive a conviction, a felony conviction, sometimes even misdemeanor convictions, what they receive a conviction, and they're in prison, many times they are enslaved and they are working slave labor within the prison system. And so another source to look at is Michelle Alexander's book, the New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in a Colorblind Society, or something like that. But you want to look at that book because it really talks about how this mass incarceration has continued on over the years, and why communities of color in the situation they're in right now. I look at the communities as being mass incarcerated. You don't even have to be one who has had a brush with the law, but you're living in a community that's mass incarcerated, one in which on every corner there are lights, there are cameras that are watching, the movements of everybody and seeing what's going on and what have you. As a pastor in Lexington, Kentucky, I remember the police bringing in all of the pastors, local pastors, and saying, we're getting ready to do this raid in such and such community. And in this community, we've been watching all of this drug trafficking that's been taken on. And so they show us a film of a home and where drugs trafficking was just taking place, in the community. And so now they're telling us beforehand, because they want to get us to buy into what they're getting ready to do, and to raid that situation. But they're not looking at it from the standpoint of, well, there's a reason why there's a drug problem on the streets. And maybe there's a reason why people are self-medicating themselves because of the situation that they're living in. And so how would we deal with that? And from that standpoint, we're dealing with ecological crisis, the polar caps, Arctic caps, they're in Antarctica. They're everything is melting, because of global warming that's taking place. And global warming is taking place because of a number of different things that we as humans are doing that we need to not do, but it's taking place. And we can do something about it. But, when we have nations as ours that are not in agreement with other nations, our leadership is not in agreement with other nations in terms of how do we solve the problem, or that there is even a problem, then it becomes an issue. It's a crisis that we're dealing with. We have civil rights crisis as well. Civil rights of people of African descent in the United States has always been a problem. We had the Civil Rights Act that has gone on, that was written, and that had the strongest one being established in 1965. But there were others prior to 65 as well, that weren't as strong. And then a lot of the things that are going on with the Civil Rights Act, the resultant of the Civil Rights Act, are gradually being taken away. A lot of those rights are being removed. So you have, like, for instance, the Community Reinvestment Act that is focused on ending redlining. And redlining meaning basically that you have areas that are established for people who are marginalized, people of African descent, people who are Latinos, people who are poor, and basically saying that you can only live in these communities and what have you. And so that redlining is was being was something that it's a crisis. It's a crisis problem, but it's one in which it has how do I say it? It's been a problem, but Community Reinvestment Act is an act that banks are supposed to make sure that these communities receive funding to do the things that they need to do so they are viable communities for the people that live in them. Well, there's been a move to limit the Community Reinvestment Act and what they can provide to these communities. And so now, there's a crisis that's taking place there. There's a Black Power crisis, and that has taken place in the past and it's taking place now. We had a civil rights movement, we have the Black Power movement as well that's taking place. I'd say that the culmination of those two, as well as other things, and even the Chicano crisis that has taken place, the Chicano movement, all of that I see has come in the form now of what we call the Black Lives Matter movement and other intersectional movements that are taking place. I want to take a quick second here and I'll be right back if you don't mind. Okay? Thank you.
Katina, at St. John's a few years ago, there was a man, I think he worked there, who actually the students were enslaved. He had a group of female students who I guess he was putting through school. However, he was also prostituting them, and it was this big thing.
Oh, wow.
On the campus of St. John's.
In New York.
Yes. Yes.
So they were students and working for him.
Yes. Yes. I'm sorry. His daughter was a student, but there were other girls. I don't think they were students there. Crazy.
And this was the president of the university?
Oh, no, he wasn't the president, but I think he had a title on campus.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're talking about another crisis?
Yeah. Well, this was a year or two ago, when you were talking about trafficking of women. Mm-hmm. This man on the campus of St. John's University was using his daughter's dorm room to hold all of these girls, and he utilized them for different things, of course. Yeah.
And you see a lot of that also with politicians. If we jump back to Barack Obama's administration and the scandal with all of the Secret Service men that were with him that went to some country in South America, and they're all sleeping with prostitutes, and the same thing with more recently in the current administration, that with Donald Trump, there was scandal of in Florida of I think it was a massage place where they had all of these girls that were basically sexually trafficked. They were prostitutes or became prostitutes, and so that there's an issue there. I mean, it's a major issue. There's an immoral issue of that, of doing that. But then there's also the issue of, okay, you have sexual workers as well, sex workers, and those sex workers are being exploited as well. So you have all of that that's taking place. These are crises of humanity that take place. If I go on, you have family crisis. Families are in crisis, and so whether you have a nuclear family or you have a family, extended family, which is more prevalent in the African American community, you have crises that are going on because families are trying to just survive all the other stuff that's going on. How do you maintain as a family? And then you also have society that's saying, okay, this is what a family is supposed to look like. Okay, we don't look like that. So now there's a disconnect. And so because you don't look like that, you're not going to benefit from the things that this nuclear family, for instance, would benefit from. I think of the TV show Good Times, and how, they live in Compete Green, which no longer exists anymore. It's been gentrified, but they live in Compete Green. They live in this high rise, and eventually, James has to leave. James, the father, has to leave in order for them to continue getting welfare money, assistance from the government, because, you can't have somebody who's working and receive this assistance. I look at those who have been previously incarcerated, who leave the prison and they have a felony conviction and they can't live in public housing, because they have this felony conviction, and so it's not like they're going to go, okay, well, I can't live in public housing, I'm going to live in this gated community now. It's it's not like that. They have to have somewhere to live, so they're going to be on the streets. And so if they're going to be in public housing, they're going to be in hiding there, or they're going, whatever the case might be. We have crisis of babies on the border, with the immigration policies of this administration that we're dealing with right now. That's major. Babies are in cage and cells. They are, women are being raped. From what I understand, girls are receiving hysterectomies, and all kinds of things like that are taking place. And they're being abused sexually. You have criminal justice crisis, and this is this is really prevalent, that you have an administration that is extremely, it's even more than conservative. It's just wild, crazy. And you have this conservative administration, and the vast majority of the people in this country are not conservative, but they want to maintain control over that. So then you have the Supreme Court, use that as an example, this balance of conservative and liberal. And you have Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Justice, who just passed away, who was liberal. And before she's in the ground, you have politicians and the President of the United States saying, okay, we're going to replace her, when her wish was that, the next president will replace her. We got this election coming up on November 3rd. But she should have, what happens now is that they have someone else up, that they're bringing forth to replace her, so that they can have the conservative views take place and take control. But not only that, you have a party, a Republican Party, more specifically conservatives. And I'm saying this not because I have a hate for Republicans or I love Democrats that much more, But the thing is, this is the reality of what's going on right now. This is the crisis that we're facing. The vast majority of the people are not represented by the Republican Party. However, the courts have all of these Republican justices on them, some that are in place because they've been appointed, and others that have been that are actually there because they've been voted in. And the ones that have been voted in, when they have these elections, you don't know where they stand. They keep it evasive about, whether they are liberal or they're conservative, and then on top of it, people that a lot of times they convict, if they have a felony charge, they can't vote for them. So it doesn't really matter. They're not concerned about those who receive those charges, So is that, that's part of this criminal justice crisis. Another part of it is that you have police that are ready to incarcerate and do violence in the society against people of color. It's more specifically African Americans, but also other people of color. They've taken lives. It's all evident. We go down the bottom of this list. We talk about George Floyd. We talk about Breonna Taylor. We talk about Jacob Blake. All of them have been either died or been injured by the state, by those in the society, the police that are quote unquote supposed to serve and protect. So there's a crisis, a justice crisis. Now the problem is that they are incentivized by the Department of Justice of the United States with grants that say, okay, we're going to incentivize you with monies that say, okay, well, you bring in so many people that are felons, you're going to get a bonus for doing that. Or, if you lock up someone and at the end, if you're at the end of your shift, you're going to do overtime and get extra money because now you're writing up the paperwork for that person you just locked up at the end of your shift, but there's no focus on humanity. There's no focus on, okay, how can we, instead of escalating this and making an arrest, how can we make it so that we're helping out this person in this situation at this particular time? It's very money incentivized. Michelle Alexander's book speaks to that as well. We have a crisis of misogyny, where this country is a very patriarchal country. We have a Bible that's a very patriarchal Bible, unless you really understand it and break it down, you see a lot of things that are focused on hatred of women. You can go to Judges 19, for instance. That entire chapter, Judges 19, is one that is violence against women. You can go to the whole story of the book of Ruth, and you talk about Boaz and Ruth. And in that story, a lot of times we hear people talk about that story, and they talk about how, a woman wants to, Tamar as well, how she was raped by her brother, but you look at Boaz, and I'm glad you brought up Tamar, because it says, this woman was raped, he took her, and when you look at Boaz, they talk about how, basically make a love story, and how, women, a good Christian woman will get her Boaz, that kind of man. Well, the reality is the same word that they use for Tamar, rape, is the same word when they use for Boaz taking Ruth. It's rape. And so, there's a different understanding that you have to look at when you're really looking to what these words are saying in the scriptures, but it's patriarchal. And then we convert it into English, and the English comes off, well, this is what they really meant and what have you. It doesn't really mean that, But this misogyny is prevalent throughout society. We have the instance just now with Ice Cube, the rapper. O'Shea Jackson is his name. O'Shea Jackson Sr. And O'Shea Jackson has gotten in trouble because he's trying to bring forth this agenda for all of Black people. And he's a rapper, And so part of that problem is that this agenda that he has does not speak to Black women at all, I jump on down, it doesn't speak to the heteronormativity in society. It doesn't speak to the LGBTQIA community. It doesn't even speak to Black Lives Matter. It speaks to this is, this a perception of what things should be like, and what will be better for African Americans based on, what a Black male's perspective is. And so that's a major part of all of this. Xenophobia, we touched on babies on the border. Xenophobia, this fear of the immigrant, fear of people who are not like us, that come from us. What the Bible talks about, that we need to be focused on treating the immigrant the same as you would treat yourselves, your own people and what have you. We got an administration that's basically ready to treat anybody that doesn't believe what they believe as an immigrant, in this country. That includes those of us who've lived here and been born here and what have you. You can see that in a response to Barack Obama, who was born in Hawaii, but because his name is Barack Hussein Obama, they're saying, okay, well, this guy is not from here. He's not one of us because he doesn't have a American name, So now we need he's not legitimate, as the current president has always said, heteronormativity, we get the crisis of that, the basic one is that, this fear of allowing people to love who they want to love, as opposed to being in a space where people can love, basically saying that people can't love who they want to love, and that this is the norm, or that, the definitions of orientation, sexual orientation, are binary, that, there's male and there's female and there's no in between, there's no kind of this, there's none of that, what have you, but not realizing that, hey, there are people that are transgender, there are people that are bisexual or homosexual. And I say homosexual, I really don't like to even use that word, that are lesbian or are gay or what have you, all of those different things. And that realizing that that's the identity that those individuals have. And if that's the identity that a person has, then that's fine for that particular person to have that identity. Who am I to be the one to say, yes, this is right and this is wrong? It goes on into crisis of identity. Crisis of identity also could be this movement of what they call the ADOS, the American descendants of slaves. It's a new term now that's come up. That's basically saying that, I'm an American and my descendants were slaves. Barack Obama, for instance, doesn't fall in that because he's an American, but then his father was from Africa and his mother was never enslaved. Neither one of them were enslaved, or their ancestors weren't enslaved. So he's not ADOS, so he's not a real Black person, And so that's the whole idea with this movement of ADOS. And then you have George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Jacob Blake. This is all Black Lives Matter. You have a situation with Breonna Taylor. I mean, it's crazy because you had a Black attorney general here in Kentucky who basically said, there was no wrong with police officers coming in and killing this woman in the middle of the night, with no justification, and just so, too bad, so sad, and let's move on, And you have Jacob Blake, a man who's walking to his car, is not inciting violence or anything, and the police are shoot this man in the back 7 times because they fear his child inside the car is going to do something to them. Child who's a toddler, not toddler, but I mean a small child. I don't even know how old the child was. He had 3 children in the car at the time. All this stuff is taking place. These are crises of humanity. And then you have also, let's see, jump back. You have crisis of the cross. That crisis of the cross is that we have sanctuaries that are unsafe now. Sanctuaries that, COVID has made everything unsafe at this particular point. But, prior to COVID, you had abuse that was taking place in the sanctuaries of ministers using their authority, their given authority over people in a way that's abusive to people, whether it's sexually abusive, whether it's abusive in financially or in other ways, And you have crisis of the cross with church as the agent of the society, as opposed to church being a transformer of society. There's a book by Niebuhr, Richard Niebuhr, that basically, Richard Niebuhr, that is called Christ and Community. And it talks about the various ways that the church and the community, or the church and the society, interact with one another, and you have the relevance of the church. Church, has been irrelevant in a number of ways in the community, and to people in the context of the church. We have church as an institution, which basically has the church set up as, this is the way the church is. This is what we're going to be, and it's a money-making institution, and it's an institution that is not necessary. Let's say the money-making part of it is more important than the salvation of souls for Jesus Christ, or being the prophetic office for the will of God in the society. And then you have scope creep of the church, where churches are no longer the people of God, but become something other than that, much more than that, and not even that, but some other things, as defined as what those individuals are leading to be. So that's part of this whole the ideal of time, crisis, and ministry. And so what we're going to do is, because I'm looking at the time right now, we're going to take some questions if we have any on the discussion, and we're going to touch on prophetic activism. What is prophetic activism tomorrow? We've got some more information we got to go through tomorrow with all of that. So what are your questions? What are your comments?
I have a question. I put it in a chat also. I know that your scripture for your project came from Luke, which came from Isaiah text. Yes. But is it okay to have an Old Testament scripture that does not refer to Jesus or the cross specifically?
Yeah, you can. So the whole idea, hold on one second, let me get this sound better. Mm-hmm. And what I'm going to do is stop the recording at this point too.